How's it going, everyone? This is Connor with AmateurHourMTG. Wanted to bring you another deck tech video here on one of my decks you've probably seen on the channel, Imodane the Pyrohammer. This is a mono red burn deck that I truly enjoy a lot. I spent a lot of time tweaking it, kind of going back and forth on how I wanted the deck to kind of work. I think I've got it to a point where this is about as good as it's going to get. There probably are some new cards that have come out that I haven't had a chance to take a look at and add in here. But as the deck sits right now, this is kind of the setup I have. So I wanted to go over with the deck with you, kind of show you how everything works, go card by card, kind of read everything. There are some interesting synergies within the deck that I think maybe some people might skip over. I think Imodane can be a cEDH commander for sure. I've definitely won some games on the channel. She's a lot of fun to play, and I think she's viable. So let's jump into it and take a look. So first off, we're going to start with Imodane here. We're going to read what she does. Whenever an instant or sorcery spell you control that targets only a single creature deals damage to that creature, Imodane deals that much damage to each opponent. Kind of a unique creature. Before, Burn in Commander was kind of like a meme strategy. Like, yes, you might be able to make it viable, but it was kind of tough because a lot of the big burn spells aren't each opponent. They're target creature or target, single target or something like that. Well, what Imodane does is changes those single target burns, not only hitting the creature, but hitting each of your opponents as well. So we'll kind of get into that a little bit later. We're going to jump into the creatures first and kind of go over that. But I'll kind of explain some synergies and kind of how some of these cards work. Hopefully you guys can understand it and a little bit better and build an Imodane deck yourself. So let's take a look here. First off, we've got Birgi, God of Storytelling. Whenever you cast a spell, add 1 red. Till end of turn, you don't lose this mana as steps and phases end. That's truly what Birgi's in here for. She has a flip side. I don't think anybody knows what the other side does because everyone just casts her for this. Every time you cast a spell, adding a red mana can be very, very powerful. Whenever you're casting single, 1 mana spells, you're essentially casting them for free. So super, super helpful. She is essentially like a ruby medallion in a sense, if you think of it that way. Next we have Brash Taunter. Oh, let's do this here because we need to sort them by mana value. Okay, let's restart. A Dragon Rage Channeler. 1 red. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, surveil 1. Surveil is look at the top card of your library, and you may put that into the graveyard. What she is in here for is to kind of help you look at the top and decide, is that a card that I really need in this current situation, or can I get rid of it? So, having her in your turn 1 hand, along with maybe a couple artifacts, can be helpful. That's going to help you kind of get some early cards that maybe you need to start the game off with. Or if you see some trash on the top that you don't want, put it in the graveyard. Get rid of it. And then she has Delirium. As long as there are 4 or more card types among cards in your graveyard, she gets +2/+2, has flying, and attacks each combat if able. So once you hit that Delirium, she then turns into a 3/3 flyer, which can be very good at defending your board from incoming attacks or swinging out if you need to. Now, she does have to attack each combat, so that kind of defeats the purpose of having her to block, but she'll be flying over, hitting everyone, hitting people for 3 damage. Next, we got Ragavan. Whenever Ragavan deals combat damage to a player, create a treasure token, exile the top card of that player's library till end of turn, you may cast that card. Ragavan's here early game to help us generate some treasures. We really need to get our mana up as quickly as we can because we're going to be casting a lot of spells. We want to get Imodane out and start casting instant and sorceries as quickly as we can. Vindictive Flamestoker. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put an oil counter on Vindictive Flamestoker. Then you can spend 6 colorless, 1 red, sacrifice him, discard your hand, draw 4 cards. This ability costs 1 less to activate for each oil counter. So as I was testing this deck, something I ran into a lot was I was running out of gas. I was getting Imodane out, casting a lot of spells, and then I was sitting here with 2, 1, 0 cards in hand, and then I'm just top decking and hopefully I get something. Well, Vindictive Flamestoker kind of helps prevent that, and you know, if you get to a point where you're out of cards, this guy probably has a couple oil counters on him by then, sack him, draw 4 more cards. Dockside, I mean, do we really need to go over why Dockside's in here? A Humble Defector. Similar to the Vindictive Flamestoker, Humble Defector, you'll be able to tap, draw 2 cards. Target opponent gains control of Humble Defector. Now, you might be thinking, Connor, that's bad. Why are we giving Humble Defector to an opponent so they can draw 2 cards? Well, what we kind of want to do is use this guy as a 2-mana draw 2, and then we're going to hit him with an instant or sorcery on an opponent's board state to kill him. And then using Imodane's ability, we're going to deal that much damage to everyone. So that's kind of the best way to look at it. He's a 2-mana draw 2, and we're probably going to hit him with a kill spell on our next turn. Magda, Brazen Outlaw, similar situation. She is just here to attack and generate a treasure token, get mana as quickly as we can. Runaway Steamkin, very, very, very strong card in this deck. 1 red, 1 generic. Whenever you cast a red spell, if Runaway Steamkin has fewer than 3 +1/+1 counters, put a +1/+1 counter on Runaway Steamkin. Then you can remove 3 +1/+1 counters and add 3 red. So in a mono red deck, we're casting a lot of red spells. As we're casting those spells, we're putting counters on Steamkin. Once he gets 3, we'll remove them and add 3 mana. So kind of like we just went over Bergie, he does a similar thing, but he can help you load up for your next turn. So you cast 2 spells, put 2 counters on him. Next turn you cast 1 spell. Now he's got 3. Remove those 3. Now you got 3 red mana available to you. Dual Caster and Twin Flame is a win con, 2-card win con. If you don't know how Twin Flame works, we'll jump down here and show you that one real quick. Choose any number of target creatures you control. For each of them, create a token that's a copy of that creature, except it have haste. Exile those tokens at the beginning of the next end step. So, kind of how that combo works. You have 1 other creature on the board. You cast Twin Flame, targeting that 1 creature. It can be anything. With that on the stack, you cast Dual Caster. Well, Dual Caster is going to come in, and it's going to copy Twin Flame. Twin Flame, that copied Twin Flame, is then going to target Dual Caster. Create a copy of Dual Caster. That copy comes in, copies Twin Flame again. And so on and so forth. So you make infinite Dual Caster mages, and Twin Flame says they have haste. So then, if you did this on your pre-combat main phase, you make 1 billion Dual Caster mages, and you swing out. That's how you win. Imperial Recruiter. When Imperial Recruiter enters the battlefield, search your library for a creature with power 2 or less, reveal it, put it in your hand. He's going to be helpful to get a couple different things. Runaway Steamkin. I mean, every creature except Bergie that we've looked at so far, Imperial Recruiter can go get. Really, what I like to use Imperial Recruiter for is to get Magnus of the Moon. If you can get an early Magnus of the Moon, Blood Moon type effect out, early, like turn 1, turn 2, turn 3, you're going to set yourself up pretty good for the rest of the game. Because you're going to be shutting down a lot of these cEDH decks that run, a lot of non-basics and multicolors. Magnus of the Moon, non-basic lands or mountains. It's pretty good. Professional Facebreaker, 2 generic, 1 red, has Menace, and whenever 1 or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, create a treasure token. And then you can sacrifice a treasure, exile the top card of your library. You can play that card. So another treasure generator. And then if we do have treasures, Professional Facebreaker is going to help us exile those treasures, reveal the top card of our library, and be able to play that card. So we're getting access to more cards. Seasoned Pyromancer. When it enters the battlefield, discard 2 cards and draw 2. For each non-land card discarded this way, create a 1/1 elemental. What we want to use him for is getting trash out of our hands. Cards that maybe we don't need. Cast him, discard 2, draw 2. Very easy. Treasure Nabber. I freaking love this card. Almost every time I cast it, it gets me so much value because people use a lot of artifacts in cEDH, and I don't think they realize how strong it is to give those to the mono red player for one turn. But whenever an opponent taps an artifact for mana, gain control of that artifact till end of turn. End of your next turn, very strong. These people are going to, your opponents are going to tap their mana vaults, or excuse me, not mana vaults, but like Chrome Mox, Mana Crypts, Mox Diamonds, Felwar Stones, all these artifacts. They tap them for mana. You're going to get them until the end of your next turn. So that's going to load you up on your next turn to have an explosive turn, have a bunch of mana available. And like I said, every time I played this guy, he's done exactly what I want him to do. Sulfum, Mayhem Dominus, 2 red, 2 generic. If a source you control would deal non-combat damage to an opponent, or a permanent opponent controls, it deals double that damage to a player or permanent instead. Okay, we're going to get into the damage doublers, and I'm going to explain kind of how these work. So, let's say you have Sulfum out, all right? And right down here, Lightning Bolt. We all know what Lightning Bolt, 3 damage to a single target. Let's say you got Sulfum out, which is a damage doubler. And you have Imodane, and an opponent has one other creature. Cast Lightning Bolt. Lightning Bolt targeting your opponent's creature. Sulfum says, whenever you deal non-combat damage, it's doubled. So instead of Lightning Bolt dealing 3 damage, it's now 6. 6 damage to that creature. Imodane says whenever you deal damage to a single creature, Imodane deals that much damage to each opponent. Now this is important. It's Imodane dealing the damage. So that damage gets cycled through another source. So your Lightning Bolt is doubled from Sulfum for 6. Imodane then deals that 6 damage, and it's doubled through Sulfum again to deal 12. So your 1 mana, 3 damage Lightning Bolt now just did 6 damage to a creature and 12 damage to each of your opponents. Very, very, very strong. So we want to run almost all the damage doublers we can, and we'll get into that a little bit later. Brash Taunter. Whatever Brash Taunter has dealt damage, it deals that much damage to target opponent. So maybe you have a specific opponent you need to eliminate quickly. You can just have all your instant and sorcery damage spells target Brash Taunter, because Imodane doesn't say it has to be an opponent's creature. It could be your own creature. So you're going to deal damage to Brash Taunter. Imodane's going to deal that damage to everyone. And then Brash Taunter is going to be able to deal that much damage again to a single target. So that can really help you eliminate a high priority opponent who you may think is in a position to win the game quickly. You can single him out and start pinging them down. Heartless Hexague. This card, it's just there to get life totals down as quickly as we can. 5 mana, 3 generic, 2 red. Heartless Hexague deals damage to each opponent. Each player equal to half that player's. Each opponent half their life total rounded down. So, with Sulfum, Heartless Hexague pretty much just wins you the game. Because this is at, if a source you would control would deal non-combat damage to an opponent, or a permanent opponent controls, deals double that damage. Well, Hexague is dealing damage. So he's going to deal half their damage, and then it's doubled, so he's going to deal the other half. Very simple. I'm going to have the internal. Afflict 3. At the beginning of your post-combat main phase, add 1 red for each 1 life your opponents have lost this turn. Okay, another synergy. Neheb, and we're going to scroll down here to the enchantments. Virtue of Courage. Now, I understand it's a lot of mana, but if you set this up, you're probably going to win. You've got a very, very high chance to win. So, let's read Neheb again. At the beginning of your post-combat main phase, add 1 red mana for each 1 life your opponents have lost this turn. Scroll down to Virtue of Courage. Obviously, we have the Adventure effect, but we're going to look at the card itself. Whenever a source you control deals non-combat damage to an opponent, you may exile that many cards from the top of your library. You may play those cards this turn. Okay. So, with Imodane out, you're going to cast your Lightning Bolt. Where are we at? Lightning Bolt. You're going to deal your 3 damage to each opponent. Virtue of Courage is going to have you exile that many cards from the top of your library. So if you have 3 opponents, you're going to exile 9 cards. Well, you did 9 damage. So now you're going to add 9 red on your post-combat main phase. So now you've got access to 9 cards and 9 red mana with these 2. And that's just off the lightning bolt. There's many, many spells in here that deal way more damage than 3. So you're going to load up on your mana. You're going to get a bunch of access, or well, a lot of access to your library, a lot of cards off the top of your library, and you're going to be able to cast those post-combat. And at that point, you should be able to burn the table down unless somebody, you know, stops you, kills Imodane, something like that. So yeah, those two combo off very well. And plus, he, you know, just adding mana for cards that you have in your hand can also be good. Let's say you don't have the enchantment. Loading up on the red mana to cast post-combat to get spells out of your hand and to get that damage out, he's going to help out with that. All right, let's move down to the sorceries. A lot of these are just damage. Instant and sorceries, a lot of these are going to be damage spells. I'll go through them. There's a couple that kind of combo off with some different things. So we'll start off with the Chain Lightning. So right here we have 3 damage for 1 red. It is a sorcery. Then that player or permanent's controller can pay 2 red. If the player does, they may copy the spell and choose a new target for that copy. 9 times out of 10, they're not going to spend 2 red to copy it. And if they do, so be it. It's not that big of a deal. Imodane is a 4/4. So even if they copy it and try to hit Imodane with it, it's not going to kill her. Gamble. Search your library for a card. Put that card in your hand. Discard a card at random, then shuffle. Pretty straightforward. Lithomanic Barrage. 1 red. This spell cannot be countered. Lithomanic Barrage deals 1 damage to target creature or planeswalker. It deals 5 damage instead if that target is white or blue. In cEDH, we see a lot of blue creatures, pretty decent amount of white. More times than not, somebody's going to have a white or blue creature to target, and then this turns into 1 mana for 5 damage. So very, very strong. Now think about those damage doublers again. 5 damage doubled to the creature for 10. Imodane doubles it again for 20. 1 red for 20 damage to each opponent is insane value. Vandal Blast. Destroy target artifact you don't control. Has an overload cost where you can destroy everyone's artifacts that you don't control. Spitting Earth. Spitting Earth deals damage equal to the number of mountains you control to target creature. We run a lot of just basic mountains. We literally have 2 non-basic lands and that is it. And I'll get into that here in just a moment. But late game, when you have, 5, 6, 7 mountains out, this can deal some pretty good damage for 2 red, or 1 red and 1 generic. Twin Flame, we already talked about that, how that combos off with the dual caster. Ren's Resolve. Exile the top 2 cards of your library. Until the end of your next turn, you may play those cards. So again, just another way to look at more cards out of our deck. Jessica's Will, extremely strong with your commander out. If you get it out early and somebody has 6 or 7 cards in the opponent's hand, you're going to add 6 or 7 red, and then you're going to exile the top 3 if you have your commander, or you could pick one or the other. Meteor Swarm, very, very good value here. It is Meteor Swarm deals 8 damage divided as you choose among X target creatures and or planeswalkers. So for 4 mana, we're dealing 8 damage. That's pretty good. That's pretty good because we're only going to target 1 creature. We're sure you could divide it up if you needed to, but then it's not going to count as Imodane trigger. So you really only want to put 1 additional mana into this to hit that creature for 8. Nahari's Warcrafting. Nahari's Warcrafting deals 5 damage to target creature. So again, we're at 3 mana for 5 damage, which is pretty good. Target creature, planeswalker, or battle. Look at the top X cards of your library, where X is the excess damage dealt this way. You may exile one of those cards, put the rest on the bottom of your library at random order. You may play the exiled card this turn. So it's going to deal 5 damage, and then any excess damage that we dealt, we're going to exile that many cards, and we're going to get access to more cards off the top of our library, which is really what we want to be trying to do. Wheel of Fortune, again, after we've shot out all of our spells, this is going to help us reload our hand. Similar here, Wheel of Misfortune. Now, what's interesting, and this may come up if you build a similar deck like this with Imodane, this may come up at some time, so I'm just going to go over it. Each player secretly chooses a number 0 or greater. Then all players reveal the numbers simultaneously, determining the highest and lowest numbers revealed this way. Wheel of Misfortune deals damage equal to the highest number to each player who chose that number. Each player who didn't choose the lowest number discards their hand, then draws 7 cards. So essentially, everyone picks a number. Whoever the lowest is doesn't discard, doesn't take any damage, pretty much does nothing. Whoever the highest, who picked the highest number, is going to wheel, so discard, draw 7, and then take the damage equal to whatever number they picked. And then anybody in the middle of the highest and the lowest is just going to wheel. Now, in this case, Wheel of Misfortune is dealing damage. So, if you have Sulfam out, or any of your other damage doublers, and somebody says, I'm going to pay 10. Wheel of Misfortune is going to deal 10 damage to that player, but then with your damage doubler, it's actually going to deal 20. So keep that in mind. That interaction may come up at some point. Just remember that that's how that works, is Wheel of Misfortune deals the damage. It's not loss of life or anything like that. Wheel of Misfortune is dealing damage to that opponent. Shivan Meteor. Absolutely love this card. It's such a silly card, and I'm glad Imodane is able to use it. For 2 red, 3 generic, Shivan Meteor deals 13 damage to target creature. And then for 2 red, 1 generic, we can suspend it for 2, which means you'll pay the 3 mana, put it off to the side in exile with 2 time counters. Every upkeep, you'll remove a time counter. Once the final time counter has been removed, you cast the spell for free. So, if you can set this up properly where you exile or suspend Shivan Meteor, next turn you play Imodane. It's very telegraphed, but next turn you play Imodane, and then after that, you flash in a damage doubler, or maybe you get a damage doubler out at some point, you win the game. I mean, at that point, you're pretty much going to win. 13 damage times 2, 26, 26 times 2, what is that, 52 to each opponent if you have the damage doubler with Imodane. So, and again, it's just a meme card, right? 5 mana, 13 damage. No, you're not going to see this in really any other cEDH deck, at least as far as what I've seen. Jump into the instance. Lightning Axe is additional cost to cast a spell, discard a card, or pay 5 generic. We're never paying 5 generic. We're going to discard a card to cast this for sure. And it's 5 damage to a target creature for 1 red and another card, so pretty good. Lightning Bolt, 3 damage, single target. Pyroblast, choose 1, counter target spell. If it's blue, destroy target permanent if it's blue. I like Pyroblast over Red Elemental Blast, and the reason being is that this is module, which means you pick one. So when you cast it, if you're targeting a spell that's blue to counter it, somebody cannot change the target or deflecting swat or anything like that to a permanent at that point, because the counter target spell has been selected. It cannot be deflected or, switched over to a permanent at that point. That's not part of the card. So it kind of helps in that case. Shock, 1 red, 2 damage to target creature or player, instant speed. Scred. So, scroll down here. We run all snow-covered mountains for this exact reason, to turn Scred on. Scred is extremely good. Once you have 3 mountains, Scred just turns into another lightning bolt for us. And as those mountains come out and get stacked up, Scred is just going to get stronger and stronger, because those are snow permanents. Snow-covered mountains, and so that's why we run snow-covered mountains, is specifically for Scred. Abrade, 2 mana. Abrade deals 3 damage to target creature, or we can destroy target artifact. Chain of Plasma, 1 red, 1 generic. Chain of Plasma deals 3 damage to target creature, player. Then that player or creature's controller may discard a card from his or her hand. If the player does, he or she may copy the spell and choose a new target for the copy. What's interesting about this is when you cast this, let's just say we have Brash Taunter out. Brash Taunter's indestructible, so he's not going to die. You cast Chain of Plasma. Let's say you have 4 other cards in your hand. You're going to be able to discard a card, because that's what to copy Chain of Plasma, and hit your Brash Taunter again. Discard a card, hit him again, discard a card, hit him again. So when you cast this, if you're targeting a creature of yours, and it can be any creature, you're essentially turning the cards in your hand into lightning bolts for free. So pretty unique interaction. I don't know how often that's probably going to come up in your game. I've had it happen with me one time, but I think it's good enough to put it in the deck for that reason. Commune with Lava, 2 red, X cost. Exile the top X cards of your library until the end of your next turn. You may play those cards. So again, this is going to help us see more cards out of our deck. Crushing Pain, 1 red, 1 generic. Crushing Pain deals 6 damage to target creature that was dealt damage this turn. Now, the way you kind of want to use this is as a kind of like as a trap card. Keep the mana up on your turn, or when you pass the turn. If somebody swings into you, somebody swings into you or attacks another opponent, one of those creatures gets damage dealt to them, and it's still alive. Boom! You can hit them with this, deal 6 damage. Having that with Imodane and a damage doubler, or even just Imodane, is very good. Electro Dominance, 2 red, X cost. Electro Dominance deals X damage to any target. You may cast a card with converted mana cost X or less from your hand without paying its mana cost. So, think of Electro Dominance as a fireball that just costs 1 more red. We're going to pump our mana into it, and then we're going to be able to cast another spell from our hand. So, if we have, any of these bigger damage spells, Shivan Meteor, Meteor Swarm, anything like that, and we put 4 mana into Electro Dominance, which can be very easy with like a Jeska's Will, or like we talked about earlier in the Heb, we're going to then deal 5 damage from Electro Dominance, and then another whatever damage with the free spell that we cast. So very good. What's also neat is you can use that to cast any card from your hand. It doesn't have to be an instant or sorcery. It could be an enchantment. It can be another creature, whatever. Fire Prophecy, 3 damage to target creature, and then you can put a card from your hand on the bottom of your library. If you do, draw a card. So we're going to deal 3 damage, and then we're going to get a card that might be trash in our current situation out of our hand, put it on the bottom, draw something new. Harvest Pyre, pretty unique card. As an additional cost to cast Harvest Pyre, exile X cards from your graveyard. Harvest Pyre deals X damage to target creature. This is like it essentially has Delve. You're going to spend 1 red, 1 generic. You're going to delve out your entire graveyard, and for every card that you exile, you're going to deal 1 damage for each of those. So if you delve out 13 cards out of your graveyard, which can be pretty easy to do, there's 13 damage. Target creature. So you just turned Harvest Pyre into a Shivan Meteor for 2 mana instead of having to spend the 5. Incinerate, 1 red, 1 generic. Incinerate deals 3 damage to target creature or player. Creature dealt damage this way can't be regenerated. It's just a neat 3 damage spell. I have the foil. As you can see, I foiled this deck out pretty good. I have it foiled. I got it signed by Mark Poole at MagicCon, so more of a flavor card than anything else. There's probably better options, but I want to keep it in there for that reason. Tybalt's Trickery, counter target spell. Very mono red counter spell. Choose 1, 2, or 3 at random. Its controller mills that many cards, then exiles cards off the top of their library until they exile a non-land card with a different name than the spell. They may cast that card without paying its mana cost. Then they put the exiled cards on the bottom of their library in random order. Sometimes this can backfire. Most of the time you're casting this to stop somebody's win con. Most people are not, obviously Pyroblast, Red Elemental Blast, those things exist. Most people aren't expecting the mono red player to counter their win con. That's what you want to use it for. And just hope they don't hit something that's going to help them win the game off of the flips. Deflecting Swat. If you control your commander, you may cast a spell without paying its mana cost. Choose new targets for target spell or ability. This card is Urza's Rage. It is 1 red, 2 generic. It cannot be countered. Deals 3 damage to target creature. And then it has I can't remember the name of the ability, But essentially you can pay 8 and 1 red instead. So 9 mana, and it will deal 10 damage instead. Sometimes it can be tough to get up to red, or 9 red, but if you have it, you're going to guaranteed 10 damage because it can't be countered, and you're going to deal then 10 damage to each opponent with Imodane. Valakut Awakening. It is a land on the other side. Most of the time, I just play it for this side here. Put any number of cards from your hand on the bottom of your library. Draw that many cards +1. Just trying to see more cards out of our deck. A Mind Collapse. If it's your turn, you may sacrifice a mountain rather than pay the spell's mana cost. So Mind Collapse on our turn, it is an instant for 4 mana. We're not going to pay the 4. We're going to sack a mountain on our turn to deal 5 damage. Pretty straightforward. Witch Stalker's Frenzy. This spell costs 1 less to cast for each creature that attacked this turn. Witch Stalker's Friendly deals 5 damage to target creature player, or target creature. Again, we can use this on our turn, or we can use this on somebody else's turn. All it requires is somebody to attack with 3 creatures, which can be pretty easy now. I feel like right now cEDH is in a pretty high creature meta. We see a lot of creatures and stuff like that, so getting, 2 or 3 creatures attacking and getting this spell down to 2 or 1 mana is pretty easy. Invoke Calamity. You may cast up to 2 instant or sorcery spells with total mana value 6 or less from your graveyard and hand without paying their mana costs. If those spells would be put into your graveyard, exile them instead, and then exile Invoke Calamity. This is 5 mana, and we're going to cast another instant or sorcery out of our graveyard. We're going to recur those or cast one out of our hand for free. Radiant. Love this card. This will most likely 9 times out of 10 win you the game. Let's go over it. Choose target instant or sorcery that targets only a single permanent or player. For each other permanent or player that spell could target, put a copy of the spell on the stack. Each copy targets a different one of those permanents and players. Let's go over it. So, let's say I just like using Lightning Bolt because everyone knows what it does. It's very easy. Let's say you cast Lightning Bolt and targeting one of your opponent's creatures. You have 3 opponents, and let's say in total there's 8 creatures on the board between the ones you have and all the ones your opponents have. 8 creatures. You're targeting one of them with a Lightning Bolt. You then cast Radiant. What that's going to do is copy your Lightning Bolt for each other creature on the field and player it could have targeted. So you have your original Lightning Bolt. 7 other copies of Lightning Bolt are going to come out and target every other creature on the field. Imodane will then deal damage for each of those. So you're going to deal, what is that, 24 damage? 8 creatures on the field, 1 Lightning Bolt targeting each of them. Imodane then deals 24 damage to each opponent. It's insane. Same with like let's see here. Lithomaniac Barrage, all these other spells, all these other damage spells that could target any creature. You're going to make a copy for each creature on the field, and then Imodane is going to see all those copies and deal that much damage to each opponent. So, probably more times than not, it's going to set you up for a win. Magmatic Sinkhole has Delve. Magmatic Sinkhole deals 5 damage to target creature or player. If you have 5 cards in your graveyard, this is 1 red for 5 damage to target creature. Pretty straightforward. Let's jump into the artifacts. Chrome Mox. Should all know what Chrome Mox does. You're going to imprint a non-artifact, non-land card from your hand. Or exile it from your hand, and then whatever card you exile, Chrome Mox is going to tap for that mana. So if you, in our case, we're all mono red, so it's always going to tap for red. Jeweled Lotus taps for 3 red. We can only use it for our commander. Lotus Petal, it's free. Tap it, add 1 mana of any color to our mana pool. Red. Mana Crypt tap to add 2 generic, and then at our upkeep, we're going to roll or flip a coin to see if we take 3 damage. Mox Diamond, when it enters, got to discard a land card, and then Mox Diamond will tap for any color. Mana Vault, 1 mana, taps for 3, and doesn't untap during our untap step, and we have to pay 4 mana at our upkeep if we want to untap it. And then when we go to draw a card, if it's still tapped, we take a point of damage. Sensei's Top, look at the top 3 cards of your library, put them back in any order, and then we can tap it to draw a card. 1 generic cost. This is just in those kind of weird scenarios where it's like, okay, everyone is at such low life. I literally just need to draw 1 damage spell and I can win here. It's happened to me way too many times where I need 1 more spell to win and I can't seem to draw it. This is just to help us out in those situations. Soul Ring. Everyone knows what Soul Ring does. Arcane Signet. 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity. So it's pay 2 and it taps for 1. Ruby Medallion. 2 generic. Red spells we cast cost 1 less. And then the good old One Ring. Help us draw even more cards. If you don't know what the One Ring does, it's indestructible. When it enters a battlefield, or excuse me, when it enters a battlefield, if you cast it, you gain protection from everything until your next turn. At the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life for each burden counter on the One Ring, and it taps, put a burden counter on the One Ring, then draw a card for each burden counter on it. So, as the game progresses, if you get this out early enough, this can spiral out of control, and you start drawing 5, 6, 7, 8 cards on your turns, and you just take over the game. And when you cast it, you get protection from everything for at least 1 round. So what's neat is you cast it, you now have protection. You're going to be able to tap it, draw 1. Then on your next turn, it's going to untap, and you're going to tap it to draw 2. So it's going to draw you 3 cards in 1 turn cycle, give you protection from everything, and it's 4 mana. It's insane. Enchantments. All right, Spiteful Banditry. When Spiteful Banditry enters the battlefield, it deals X damage to each creature. So this is kind of like our board wipe that we want to use. Whenever 1 or more creatures your opponents control die, you create a treasure token. This ability triggers only once per turn. Okay, so it's an X spell. We can pay X into it to deal damage to each creature. So maybe we need to wipe the board. But it's an enchantment, so it sticks around, and then every time we kill an opponent's creature, we get a treasure. Happens only once per turn, but Lightning Bolt then becomes free. All of our 1 mana spells become free. All of our 2 mana spells, if they're killing things, then become 1 mana. So as creatures start dying, you get treasures, and you don't even have to kill them. If an opponent swings to another opponent and they block and a creature dies, you just get a treasure, and you didn't even do anything. Blood Moon. Yes, my favorite card in this deck. Non-basic lands or mountains. If you get a hand, and some people may say no to this. If your starting hand has Blood Moon, Mana Crypt, and 1 mountain, I don't give a shit what the rest of the cards are. Keep the hand. Play the Blood Moon turn 1. Or, yeah, turn 1. Every time. You're shutting off fetch lands. You're shutting off every land that is not a basic land, which most cEDH decks don't run a whole lot of basics. And you're putting them way behind. I mean, this card has stacks the game out long enough for me to drag it out and win the game so many times. It's just too good. Blood Sun. When it enters the battlefield, draw a card. It's 1 red, 2 generic. All lands lose all abilities except mana abilities. Similar situation with Blood Moon, not quite as good, but what this is hitting specifically is fetch lands, or truthfully any land that has any other ability besides a mana ability. So like Manamo, your opponents who are doing the stupid Manamo One Ring crap where they're drawing an insane amount of cards, you can shut that off. You get this out early enough, you're going to shut off fetch lands. So maybe somebody kept a starting hand with 2 fetches and they go after you and you get this out turn 1. Those fetch lands are trash. They can't activate them. Fable of the Mirror Breaker. I like this enchantment. I haven't quite gotten to use it a whole lot. But when it's 2 generic, 1 red. When it enters, you create a 2/2 red goblin shaman creature token with whenever this creature attacks, create a treasure. On Saga 1. Saga 2, you discard up to 2 cards. If you do, draw that many. So again, getting rid of trash, drawing more cards. And then Saga 3, exile this saga, then return it to the battlefield, transform under your control. Boom, Reflection of Kiki-Jiki. Pay 1, tap, create a token that's a copy of another target non-legendary creature you control, except it has haste. Sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. So, the Kiki-Jiki Reflection can be good if we want to create a copy of our Dockside, if we want to create a copy of Humble Defector, if we want to create a copy of Runaway Steamkin, copy of, let's see here, if you need to copy your Dualcaster again, to potentially use your Twin Flame, you can do it that way. Copy of Brash Taunter, copy of Magnus of the Moon. I don't know why you would do that, but it's an option. So backside can be good, but creating that shaman that's going to generate you treasures and then cycling out your cards out of your hand to draw more cards out of your library. Those are the 2 main reasons why this is in here. Furnace of Wrath, 3 red, 1 generic. If a source would deal damage to a creature or player, it deals double damage to that creature or player instead. Keep in mind, this is not just your sources. This is everything. Once you cast this and this hits the field, all damage from everywhere is now double. But we get more value out of it with Imodane because our stuff gets doubled and then it gets cycled through Imodane and deals double damage again. Stranglehold. Your opponents can't search libraries. If an opponent would begin an extra turn, that player skips that turn instead. So similar with kind of what these 2 do. This is 1 more mana, but you're shutting off fetch lands, you're shutting off tutors, you're shutting off extra turns. Like this can be a very good stacks piece to have out on the field. Dictate of the Twin Gods. If a source let me back up. 2 red, 3 generic. Flash. If a source would deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals double damage to that permanent or player instead. Same with Furnace of Wrath. Does the exact same thing, doubles all damage, not just ours, except it has flash. So now what we can do, let's say we suspended our Shivan Meteor. We have Imodane out. Everyone's thinking, crap, we're about to take 13 damage. Boom, Shivan Meteor for free. Oh, I'm going to flash in Dictate of the Twin Gods on top of that. GG, you win. Virtue of Courage, we went over that already. But whenever a source you control deals non-combat damage to an opponent, you may exile that many cards from the top of your library. You may play those cards this turn. Again, you're going to get so much. If you get this out, you're going to get so much value. Even if you don't have Neheb, you're going to see so many cards out of your library. It's just too good not to have. Fiery Emancipation. 3 generic, 3 red. If a source you control would deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals triple that damage to a permanent or player instead. So now, with Fiery Emancipation out, our lightning bolts would deal 9, and then it doubles through Imodane again to deal 18. You're now spending 1 mana to deal 18 damage. Then we'll run through the lands. Den of the Bugbear. If you control 2 or more other lands, Den of the Bugbear enters tap. You can tap it for 1 red. Worst case scenario, you can use 3 red or 3 generic, 1 red. Turn Bugbear or Den of the Bugbear into a 3/2 goblin, which whenever this creature attacks, create a 1/1 red goblin token that's tapped and attacking. It's still a land. So he could just, in weird scenarios where you don't have any creatures, you need to target something with an instant or sorcery, and you don't want to kill Imodane. You can turn your land into a creature, attack. Now you have 2 creatures that could become targets, and you're going to deal a little bit of damage. Snow-covered mountains. We run 24 snow-covered mountains. And then Valakut, the Molten Pinnacle. Enters the battlefield tapped. Whenever a mountain enters the battlefield under your control, if you control at least 5 other mountains, you may have Valakut, the Molten Pinnacle, deal 3 damage to a target creature or player. Late game, as you start playing your mountains, they're going to turn into lightning bolts. Does not trigger Imodane because it's not an instant or sorcery. Imodane specifically says instant or sorcery. So this is just going to get us some extra damage out. And yeah, that's the deck. I freaking love this deck. I really do. It's pretty close up there with my Yuriko deck. I mean, I enjoy both of them, but mono red burn has kind of been a archetype that I've wanted to have in cEDH, or well, just Commander in general, but specifically cEDH. And we didn't really have a commander that could really do it that well until we got Imodane. So, yeah, let me know in the comments what you think. Let me know if I screwed something up. I don't think I did, but maybe I did. Let me know what you think you would put in the deck, or, you know, if you think of a card that might be good. I'm always open to feedback and criticism. I'm definitely willing to test out new cards. So if you have something you think, hey, Connor, I'm using this in my Imodane deck, or hey, did you take a look at this and see how this interaction would work? Yeah, put it down in the comments and I'll check it out. Be sure to like the video, subscribe if you haven't already. I've got a couple other deck tech videos on our channel. We post a lot of cEDH gameplay, so make sure you check those out as well. And yeah, I appreciate you watching, and have a great rest of your day. Take care.